What we do here is go back.
The 2026 World Cup was one of the most controversial and thrilling World Cups of all time. We had an abundance of late goals, upsets, the greatest ever Golden Boot race, and the last dance for a multitude of legends. So now, with it all said and done, let's take a look back at the entire story of the 2026 World Cup. And the tournament began in Mexico with a repeat of the 2010 World Cup opener between Mexico and South Africa, where Tshabalala scored an iconic goal for Bafana Bafana. But this time it was a very different story for South Africa, with this bozo Sithole producing some pure incompetence early on to allow Quinones to break through and score the opening goal of the 2026 World Cup, before Sithole then dragged down Gutierrez one-on-one to get himself sent off. An advantage Mexico made the most of, as an emotional Raul Jimenez headed in from close range to make it 2-0. It got worse for South Africa as Rain got sent off as well, this time for violent conduct, a decision that this South African player could not believe. And then Mexico were given a red card too, with Montes somehow being sent off for this, rounding off a crazy opening game to the tournament. Next, Czechia took the lead against Korea through a throw-in routine, but the lead wouldn't last as Frank produced a beautiful cutback and chip to draw the game back level, before playing it across the box for O, who came off the bench to secure the winner. Then it was time for fellow co-host Canada to kick off their tournament in Toronto against Bosnia, where they found themselves falling behind to a well-worked corner. And in need of an equaliser, substitute Carl Lowne stepped up with a volley on the turn to salvage Canada a point. But now it's the USA's turn to begin their tournament as co-hosts. And with everyone writing them off as unserious when it came to football, they were ready to put on a show to prove to the world that they were not playing around in this World Cup, as they hosted Paraguay in LA, and came out the blocks absolutely electric, with Pulisic and McKennie linking up to force an early own goal through Bobadilla. A cutback was then finished off by Balogun into the bottom corner, before he chopped inside to smack in a third for the USA. Maurizio pulled one back for Paraguay in the second half, just for Giovanni Reina to slap in a phantasmagorical Trivela to round off a stunning 4-1 victory for the USA. Against Qatar, Switzerland won an early controversial penalty because everyone thought it was offside, but it wasn't, and Ndombolo scored it to put Switzerland into the lead. But then Switzerland got complacent, and to everyone's surprise, Qatar actually equalised in the last minute to win their first ever World Cup win. Brazil then faced Morocco in arguably the biggest game of the group stage, and early on Diaz played through Saibari to dink Alisson and deservedly opened the scoring for Morocco. However, Vinicius powered through, cut back and smacked in an equaliser to become Brazil's hero, whilst a deflected McGinn shot gave Scotland a scrappy 1-0 win over Haiti, their first World Cup win for 36 years. Dark horses Turkey then took on Australia, who soaked up all the pressure and then hit Turkey on the counter with a wonderful touch and finish by Iran Kunda, with a Metcalf strike in the second half seeing a 2-0 Australia win despite Turkey having 30 shots in the game. Germany had been knocked out of both the 2018 and 2022 World Cups in the group stage in embarrassing fashion. But now in 2026 they had a fantastic chance to get off to a great start, facing debutants Curaçao in the opening game. And of course they kicked off perfectly through an early Felix Lemaitre banger. However, then came a moment that shocked everybody, as Curaçao actually managed to score against Germany, with Comenencia firing in from the edge of the box. A moment of true jubilation for the smallest nation to ever qualify for the World Cup. Their moment was short-lived though, as Schlotterbeck restored Germany's lead from a corner, before Lemaitre won a penalty which was converted by Havertz before half-time. And from there, Germany ran riot, with Musiala scoring a minute into the second half, Brown volleying in a fifth goal for the Germans, Undav coming off the bench to tap in past 3 players on the line, and then Havertz rounding off the scoring with a late chip, making it 7-1 to Germany. A wonderful start for the Germans, who already had 1 foot in the knockouts. Meanwhile, the Dutch kicked off against Japan, where Van Dijk headed the Netherlands into a second half lead, just for Nakamura to cut inside and brilliantly smacking an equaliser for Japan. Somerville then responded with his left foot from range and it was 2-1, but a late corner was met by Ogawa, whose header deflected Kamada past the goalkeeper, and the game ended as a thrilling 2-2 draw. Ecuador hit the crossbar a couple times in their clash with Ivory Coast, but a last minute run by Singo who found Amma to drive in the winner, so the Ivorians win the 3 points in a tight affair. And then Sweden faced Tunisia, where Ayari thunderbolted in the opener with a stunning volley, before Isak hit the Tunisians on the counter to slap in a second. Rekic pulled one back with a header for Tunisia, but then some disastrous play at the back by this bozo allowed Isak to find Jokeres to easily make it 3. Svanberg then came off the bench and scored with his first touch inside 12 seconds from a free kick, and finally Ayari, who started the scoring, finished it with another banger, as Sweden won their first game 5-1, whilst Tunisia decided to sack their manager after the very first match. Yeah, I have no idea what they were thinking either. Spain entered the 2026 World Cup as the favourites after winning the Euros in 2024, and had a very favourable opening game, facing Cape Verde, who had never made it to the World Cup before. But little did Spain know, whilst Cape Verde may be a small nation, they had big dreams. And after a shocking miss by this bozo Ferran Torres and an unbelievable goalkeeping display by veteran Vicinha, Cape Verde were able to hold on to a 0-0 draw, despite a 65 place difference in the FIFA World Rankings, a result that showed that anything can happen in the World Cup. And for this small nation, this was only the start, as Vicinha became a global hero, amassing over 17 million followers on Instagram after the game. A screamer by Ashore put Egypt into a shock lead against Belgium, who were set to lose their opening game until Lukaku came off the bench and instantly forced an own goal to salvage the Belgians a point. In 2022, Saudi Arabia began their tournament beating Argentina 2-1, and this time began again playing a South American team, this time Uruguay, as Al Amri tapped in a rebound from close range for yet another surprise lead. But this time they couldn't hold on, as a late volley by Araujo allowed the Uruguayans to escape with an underwhelming point. Iran were farcically being forced to travel from Mexico to the USA each match day, and they played minnows New Zealand in their first game, where some great hold-up play by Chris Wood was eventually finished off by Elijah Just, who almost handballed it before he was given the chance to put New Zealand ahead. But Iran would equalise as Rosaitan snuck in behind the defence to turn the ball into the net. In the second half, Elijah Just linked up again with Chris Wood to slide New Zealand back into the lead. And again it didn't last as Iran equalised once more, this time through Mehebi, whose celebration probably didn't help Iran's case of injustice. Senegal were unable to take their first half chance against joint favourites France, and were punished for it in the second half as Elise and Mbappe linked up to slot France ahead. Then Barcola came off the bench and ran through to make it 2-0 to France, before substitute Mbaye absolutely ripped Hernandez and smacked one back for Senegal late on, just for Mbappe to respond instantly with a flipping banger, ridiculously restoring France's 2-goal lead and making him France's all-time top goal scorer. Haaland then inevitably tapped Norway into the lead against Iraq on his World Cup debut, but that didn't prevent a beautiful moment for Iraq, as their captain, who initially wasn't allowed into the country, headed home an equaliser. It didn't last long though, as this absolute bozo in goal allowed Haaland to score yet another simple goal. And then in the second half, two headers through Ostergaard and an own goal saw Norway secure an opening 4-1 victory. In 2022, Messi finally got his hands on football's most prestigious trophy to complete a glittering career, and everyone thought he would retire from international football on a high. But when the 2026 World Cup came around, he was still one of the best players in the world, and set to light up the globe stage once more. And he lined up in Argentina's opening game against Algeria with a new target in its sights, Miroslav Klose's World Cup goalscorer record. First he picked up the ball, ran at the defence and unleashed a strike from range past the goalkeeper, beginning his World Cup with a bang. Then in the second half, after McAllister's shot was saved, he tapped in with a composed finish, before sealing his hat-trick with a classic Lionel Messi goal, whipping one in from the edge of the box, getting his first ever World Cup hat-trick and going level with Miroslav Klose as the top all-time World Cup goalscorer. It really was the Lionel Messi show all over again. A banger by Schmid opened the scoring for Austria against Jordan, but then Jordan responded in the second half with an absolute screamer by Olwa, with the Minnows taking the game to Austria. However, eventually the Austrians retook the lead by an own goal through a corner, and then won a last-minute penalty for handball, which was converted by the veteran Marko Arnautovic. After Messi's show against Algeria, it was time for Cristiano Ronaldo's entrance onto the world stage, and his Portugal side took an early 1-0 lead through João Neves with a header, but they weren't able to hold on as Johan Wissa headed into a set-piece routine before half-time, and Portugal were unable to find another opening, shockingly dropping points in the opening game to Congo, causing an inquest where Ronaldo fans began blaming every other Portuguese player for Ronaldo's lack of contribution. England kicked off their campaign against Croatia, where an early Harry Kane penalty was saved, but then retaken due to encroachment, and Kane didn't make the same mistake twice, converting from the spot to make it 1-0. However, a banger by Baturina from the edge of the box got Croatia back into the game. It didn't last as the Croatian defenders failed to pick up Kane from a corner as he grabbed his second with a header, and some nice intricate play by Croatia saw them draw level for the second time before half-time. But in the second half, England came out a different team, with Bellingham powering through to fire England 3-2 ahead, before Saka and Rashford linked up to seal the win for England later on. Meanwhile, Ghana and Panama played out one of the worst games of all time, where a scuffed last-minute goal saw Ghana come out 1-0 winners in a game both teams deserved to lose. Whilst a simply beautiful ball by Luis Diaz was met on the volley by Munoz put Colombia ahead against Uzbekistan, but some atrocious goalkeeping by this bozo gave Faizu Levev the opportunity to equalise for Uzbekistan. The equaliser was short-lived though, as Diaz went through to make it 2-1. And then in the last minute, the ball was whipped into Campas to seal the opening victory for Colombia with a header. Hey yo, you absolute bozo! Why haven't you liked the video yet? Make sure to absolutely bukkake that like button and subscribe whilst you're at it. Thank you.
One life living up, cause we got one life.
Game week 2 kicked off with Czechia facing South Africa and taking the lead after some nice team play. However, a late penalty given for handball allowed Mokoena to equalise for South Africa. Switzerland v Bosnia started very slowly, requiring a bang on the volley by Manzambi to break the deadlock 70 minutes in, and then a red card for denying a goal-scoring opportunity opened up the floodgates, as Mbolo played it over to Vargas to side foot the Swiss into a 2-goal lead, before Manzambi tucked in a second to make it 3. Bosnia did pull one back to an absolute thunderstrike, just for this bozo to completely lose his head with this tackle tackle in the box, allowing Xhaka to seal a 4-1 win with a penalty. Meanwhile, against Canada, Qatar were absolutely hopeless, as Larin scored again, this time opening the scoring through a rebound. Then a deflection into the path of a Jonathan David volley saw the Canadians take a 2-goal lead, before Qatar also picked up a red card for denying a goal scoring opportunity. And Qatar just completely collapsed, allowing David to tap in on the line. The second half was just as bad, picking up another red card after this awful leg break for Kone, as his replacement Saliba came off the bench to score a free kick. And then the game was summed up with this defending, as the Qatari bozo walloped the ball into his own flipping net, with Jonathan David securing his hat-trick later on and a 6-0 win for Canada. A truly dreadful game of football between Mexico and South Korea was summed up by this disaster of a goal, as this bozo in goal dropped the ball, allowing Romo to tap in. Whilst in their second game, the USA once again opened the scoring through an early own goal, this time forced by Balogun, with Freeman heading in a rebound from close range in a 2-0 win for the USA. Saibari then scored once more, hammering in from a tight angle less than 2 minutes in against Scotland. In a 1-0 win, Morocco were able to see out, and some poor goalkeeping allowed Cunha to knock in a rebound to put Brazil ahead against Haiti, before he smacked in the second with his left foot to make it 2, and then Vinicius was played through and round off the scoring in the first half, making Haiti the first team knocked out the World Cup. Goloratza hammered in a Golazzo from range for Paraguay against Turkey a minute in, but the Paraguayans were then disadvantaged by a ridiculous red card.
Number 10, Paraguay, cover his mouth. Decision is red card.
However, whilst Turkey had an abundance of chances, they were still unable to score, making it now 62 shots in the competition without a goal. It was unbelievable, and a 1-0 loss meant they were now also knocked out the World Cup. Sweden had kicked off their World Cup with a devastating 5-1 win over Tunisia, with Isak and Jokers in particular looking unstoppable, and now they face their first real test, heading up against the Netherlands in their second game. But their defence absolutely could not cope with the Dutch attack, with 2 balls played across the box for Brian Brobby to tap the Netherlands into a 2-goal lead, and similarly Gakpo tapped in a third as well, before he cut inside and slapped it into the near post for his second. Elanga broke free of the defence to pull back a goal for Sweden shortly after, but a late goal by Somerville from the edge of the box sealed a 5-1 win for the Dutch, while Sweden saw their opening 5-1 win wiped up by a 5-1 loss in their second game. Kessier gave Ivory Coast a shock opener against Germany, sticking in from close range, and in need of a goal, Germany brought on Dennis Undap, who turned out to be a super sub, volleying in from a cross on his left foot to level up the scores. Then with 2 minutes to play, Pepe played it across to Odingra, who somehow managed to mess up this chance to win it, deciding not to shoot, and he got punished as Dennis Undap popped up again, this time to win it in the 94th minute, sending Germany through to the knockouts and breaking Ivorian hearts in the process. Ecuador were in need of their first win as they faced Curaçao in a game where they missed countless chances, whilst Curaçao's goalkeeper Eloy Room made a record-breaking 15 saves inside 90 minutes to keep his side a historic clean sheet, in a frustrating draw for Ecuador, who now had to beat Germany in their final game to make it to the knockouts. After sacking their manager, Tunisia now faced Japan, and it clearly didn't work as they conceded to Kamada inside just 4 minutes. Ueda then worked in a second before half-time, before Ito found himself through to tuck it past the goalkeeper. And Tunisia's absolutely dreadful performance was summed up by Ueda's header, finding its way past 2 Tunisian defenders on the line, making it 4-0 Japan, and Tunisia were knocked out already. Lamine Yamal grabbed his first World Cup goal, tapping home at the back post against Saudi Arabia, as some truly diabolical Saudi bozo defending allowed Oyarzabal to sneak in and make it 2, and minutes later he had an even easier finish from close range on the volley, whilst the second half corner was met by Cucurella on the volley, whose effort bounced back off the defender and into the net as Spain won 4-0. Belgium struggled yet again, this time against Iran, who had a first half goal ruled out for offside, and then a deplorable error by Nathan Ngoye resulted in him getting a red card for pulling down the attacker, but Iran weren't able to capitalise as the game ended 0-0. Cape Verde won the world's hearts, holding favourite Spain to a 0-0 draw in the opening game, with their goalkeeper Vizinha rising to stardom, whilst Uruguay have been incredibly underwhelming in their opening, drawing with Saudi Arabia, and now the two sides face one another in Miami in a game Uruguay had to win. But it was Cape Verde who stood up first, as Kevin Pina hammered in a free kick from about 35 yards, and we'll ignore the fact the Uruguay wall decided to just jump out the way. Uruguay were able to fight their way back though, as it was Araujo once again to equalise, this time heading in a rebound off the post, before Canobio tapped past Vizinha from close range but Uruguay ahead just before half-time. However, in the second half, a disastrous error by Muslera left an open goal expertly capitalised on by Varela, and Cape Verde had caused yet another upset, making it crisis time for Uruguay, whilst Cape Verde were on the verge of making the knockouts. Sermon headed New Zealand into the lead against Egypt from a corner, but the lead didn't last as Zico forced a second half header past the New Zealand goalkeeper, before Mohamed Salah got his goal, linking up with Zico before a cultured finish into the bottom corner, and then Trezeguet completed the scoring, flicking in a header at the near post. Whilst Argentina were given a controversial penalty penalty early on against Austria, handing Messi an opportunity to become the outright all-time World Cup record goal scorer. But he wasn't able to take it, shockingly missing from the spot. It didn't matter though, as of course he redeemed himself, producing a classic Messi finish from a cutback, and now he had the records. He wasn't done there as well, showing pure willpower to force in a second at the second time of asking, making it 2-0 to Argentina later on. And Messi's brilliance was matched by Mbappe's, who thumped in a beauty on his left foot past the Iraqi goalkeeper, in a game that was suspended at half-time due to a thunderstorm in the area. It took nearly 3 hours for the game to resume, just for Iraq to produce yet another howler by their bozos at the bat, this time allowing Mbappe to grab his second against them, before Elise played through Dembele to grab his first ever World Cup goal and seal a 3-0 France win. A bozo error by Koulibaly, followed by some diabolical goalkeeping by Mendy, allowed Pedersen to put Norway ahead against Senegal. And in the second half, Ødegaard laid it into Haaland to score again at the World Cup. Senegal did pull one back as the Ismaila Sarr stumbled through to grab a goal, just for Haaland to score again a few minutes later, this time on the volley. And in the final minute, Sarr picked up in the box to score again, making it 3-2. Against Algeria, the ball fell nicely for Al Rashdan to put Jordan into their first ever World Cup lead, but Algeria would fight back. First with Ben Bourali equalising from a corner, and then later on they grabbed the winner, with Amin Gyouri sneaking it in following a flick on from another corner for a crucial 3 points. Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo looked in disarray after the opening game against Congo, and with a lot of talk about the need for Ronaldo to be dropped, he put on a masterclass against Uzbekistan. First, he finally got his goal, thumping it in after a cutback by Cancelo to become the only player to ever score at 6 World Cups. And then he shocked everyone by providing a genius decoy to allow Nuno Mendes to slap in a free kick, before bearing down on goal to slide in the second of the game and make it 3-0 before half-time. Some bozo defending by Kusanov saw Portugal take a 4-goal lead through an own goal, and finally Rafael Leao smashing a 5th as Portugal and Ronaldo convincingly silenced all the doubters. This was followed by a disastrous performance by England, summed up by this miss by Kane as they drew 0-0 with Ghana, in a game where they were very lucky to not give away a penalty. Budimir tapped in the only goal of the game for Croatia against Panama, whilst a late winner by Munoz was the difference between Colombia and Congo in the final game of week 2. Mexico completed their perfect group stage as Chavez skipped past pathetic challenge before slotting home to make it 1-0 against Czechia, before some more truly diabolical and hopeless defending allowed Quinones to tap in from close range. And the rout was complete as Fidalgo hammered in a third to send Czechia home whilst Mexico topped the group. Meanwhile, Maseko's touch and finish on the half volley gave South Africa a shock win over Korea, meaning they would go through in second while sending the Koreans home, whose tournament had gone up in flames after a promising start. Vargas powered home the opening goal for Switzerland against Canada, before Mbolo laid it off to Manzambi to score again thanks to some hideous goalkeeping. And a beautiful touch and pass into Promise David wasn't enough for Canada as they lost 2-1, meaning Switzerland went through in first and themselves in second. Whilst Bosnia's Ally Begovic produced a beautiful goal, hammering his side into the lead against Qatar, who themselves continued to be a bunch of helpless bozos with this own goal a few minutes later. Their talisman Al Hadous pulled one back before half-time just for some more embarrassing defending and goalkeeping to cost them a third goal, and they were sent home as Bosnia went through to the knockouts. Scotland needed at least a point against Brazil, and this bozo trying to play out the back didn't help, gifting Vinicius an easy chance to open the scoring, who then knocked in ahead at the back post to make it 2 before half-time. And the final nail in Scotland's coffin was hammered in by Cunha, sending them packing with a 3-0 defeat. Haiti's fate already being sealed didn't stop them playing out an absolute classic, first taking the lead against Morocco, before Hakimi scuffs an equaliser from close range. Isidore then smacked in an absolute screamer to shockingly put Haiti back into the lead, but Hakimi's ball-in was finished by Saibari, making it 2-2 before half-time. And then in the second half, Rahimi finally put Morocco into the lead, with Yassine tapping in the 4th of a 4-2 Moroccan win. Turkey's horror World Cup continued going 1-0 down to the USA via Trusty inside 3 minutes. But now they decided to turn up, forcing an equaliser through Arda Güler, before Kokcu got his toe on the ball across the box, deflecting off Yilmaz to put Turkey ahead. In the second half, Berhalter banged in a leveller for the USA, and then in the last minute, Ayhan tapped in the back post to win the game for Turkey. A result that meant absolutely nothing, because the USA had already confirmed top spot, and Turkey were already confirmed last. And in the game that actually did matter, we got an absolutely terrible state of affairs. A 0-0 draw between Paraguay and Australia to send both teams into the knockouts. Ivory Coast had the chance to confirm their place in the knockouts, and did so with 2 goals by Nicolas Pepe against Curaçao, including this beauty to seal it. After a disastrous start to the tournament, losing to Ivory Coast and drawing to Curaçao, Ecuador needed an unlikely win in their final game against Germany, and their bad run continued as Sane scored just 2 minutes in for the Germans, despite this kick to the head in the build-up. But not long later, Angulo broke through and slapped it past Neuer to drag Ecuador back level, and now they needed just one moment to make it through to the knockouts. And that moment would come through a corner as Gonzalo Plata nicked in front of Neuer to cause jubilation throughout the entirety of Ecuador, experiencing their greatest ever World Cup moment, beating Germany to make it through to the World Cup knockouts against all the odds. Tunisia continued being a bunch of hopeless bozos, scoring an own goal against the Netherlands before Brian Brobby got his third of the tournament. But they were able to pull one back as Mastori scored from a corner, just for Van Hecker to head one in himself, securing top spot in the group for the Dutch. Whilst some orgasmic link-up play by Japan opened up Sweden and was finished off by Maeda, which Sweden responded to as Elanga smacked one in, seeing both sides make it into the knockouts. The winner would go through between New Zealand and Belgium, and it was Trossard who found the breakthrough as New Zealand diabolically failed to defend a corner, before Trossard volleyed in a second at the second time of asking. And the floodgates were opened as De Bruyne picked it up and smacked it in. Elijah adjusted well to pull one back on the volley, but Belgium responded instantly with Lukaku getting his first goal of the tournament. And then they wrapped up a 5-1 win through a Sailor-Maker strike as Belgium topped the group. Saber grabs an early goal against Iran, sneaking it past 3 defenders on the line, and then Taremi fell to equalise from the penalty spot. But Iran did then score from a tight angle a couple minutes later through Razea. And with their World Cup hopes hanging by a thread, Iran came forward with one last attack as the ball fell to Khalil Zadeh to win it for Iran in the final minute, sending them into the knockouts. However, it was ruled out by a marginal offside, breaking Iranian hearts and sending them home after a valiant effort given the circumstances they had to play on. Uruguay's horror tournament continued with a truly awful error by Muslera, allowing Baena to open the scoring for Spain, and he was playing so bad in this World Cup that he actually asked to be subbed off for half time. But it didn't get any better for Uruguay, as after an egregious challenge, Canobio was sent off and then started going after the referee. Uruguay were nothing short of disgraceful in this World Cup, with a campaign that can be summed up by Bielsa's post-match interview. Despite a last-minute open goal miss, Cape Verde drew 0-0 with Saudi Arabia and progressed in second place after 3 draws. Norway versus France was a battle to decide who finished top, which Norway decided to just not try for, rotating their entire team, and they were punished by Ousmane Dembele cutting back and smacking in the opener, before whipping in his second of the game. Asgard dumped one in just 30 seconds later, but Dembele secured his hat-trick before half-time, making it 3-1. With Haaland on the bench, Strand Larsen took a truly awful penalty, and then Doué sealed France's top spot place later on. Senegal needed to not just win, but to win big against Iraq to grab a knockout place, and got off to the perfect start as Diarra headed in from a corner, before being helped out by an Iraqi red card in under 10 minutes. Some terrible defending by this bozo Zidane Iqbal allowed Kamara to get in and square to Sarr, who made it 2, before Pape Gueye absolutely Bukaki 2 thunderbolts in from range to put Senegal 4 in the lead, and the rout was completed by an unstoppable and Jair banger. Both Jordan and Argentina's fates were already still before Lo Celso hit in this free kick, with a composed penalty by Lautaro Martinez making it 2. Altamari tapped into the back post to ensure Jordan scored in every game at this World Cup, but then of course Lionel Messi had the final say with this free kick from range, and some truly disastrous goalkeeping. Algeria produced some useless defending, allowing Arnautovic to break through and knock it around the keeper, but then some great skill by Belgali allowed him to work some space to smack in a leveller. Austria took the lead again as the ball was cut back and slapped home by Sabitzer, before another pullback, this time to Mahrez, saw Algeria equalise again, with a 2-2 seeing both sides make it to the knockouts. But then in the last minute it looked like Mahrez had won it for Algeria and sent Austria home. However, he quickly realised this would mean Algeria would go on to play Spain, so they let Austria come forward again to equalise even later on and secure second place, whilst Algeria went through in third. Colombia and Portugal played out a thrilling 0-0 draw, as somehow neither side scored a goal, with the result saying Colombia finished first and Portugal in second. Whilst a beautiful finish by Shomurodov put Uzbekistan ahead against Congo, but in the second half Congo won a penalty calmly put away by Yohan Wissa, before Mayele got a toe on the ball to knock Congo into the lead, and then Wissa slapped in a third to take his side into the knockout stages for the first time ever. England eventually found a breakthrough against Panama as Bellingham met a Saka corner, who then crossed it into Kane to head in a second and secure top spot for England. And then Sucic sniped one in from range for Croatia against Ghana, but Lucas met a free kick to equalise and put Croatia's qualification hopes in jeopardy. However, a late header by Vlasic from a corner took Croatia into the knockouts, whilst Ghana went through in third. The first game of the knockouts was co-host Canada against South Africa. A tight game won by a final minute strike by Eustáquio, taking Canada into the round of 16. Brazil then had a tricky test facing Japan and went 1-0 down to this long-range shot, putting them at risk of elimination. But after an absolutely atrocious first half, Casemiro headed in from a Gabriel cross to get his side back into the game. And then with the momentum, Vinicius went on an incredible run, nearly scoring the goal of the tournament. But in the 96th minute, it was Gabriel Martinelli who stepped up, breaking Japanese hearts and taking Brazil into the next round. Next was time for Germany to face Paraguay in the round of 32 tie, a game which everyone saw as an easy pass into the next round. But it turned out being a lot more difficult than they anticipated. As first, Julio and Cito headed in the opening goal for Paraguay, putting them into a shock 1-0 lead. A Kai Havertz header later got Germany back into the game, which ended 1-1 and went to extra time, where Jonathan Tah grabbed the winning goal heading in from a corner. However, it was ruled out by VAR for a controversial foul on the goalkeeper, meaning the game went to penalties. But Germany was still expected to win, having a 100% record in World Cup penalty shootouts. Despite that, misses by Kai Havertz and Volta Marde, was Paraguay Paraguay scored each of their 3 opening penalties, meant that Antonio Sanabria had the chance to win it for Paraguay. But then this bozo missed his penalty as well. Amiri then levelled up the shootout before Balbuena had his penalty saved by Neuer. Paraguay had 2 opportunities to win the shootout and failed both times. But just as Germany were back in it, Tar blasted his penalty over the bar, allowing Jose Canali the opportunity to win it for Paraguay at the 3rd time of asking, which he took to send his side into the next round, and shockingly send Germany home early. It was an upset that nobody had seen coming. The Netherlands then took on Morocco and grabbed the lead through an emotional Cody Gakpo goal, and were on the verge of winning before Issa Diop headed in for Morocco in stoppage time, sending the game to extra time, as once again the game went to a penalty shootout. And this shootout was a pure comedy show. Pootmanners opened the scoring whilst Anawi hit the bar. Then despite Bono almost falling over, Kluivert still managed to hit the post, before Verbruggen somehow embarrassingly let Rahimi's penalty squirm under his body. Weghorst and Taubi both then thundered in their penalties, but Quinton Timber dragged his spot kick wide, and then Hakimi hit the flipping post. Somerville was up next, and Bono made one of the weirdest penalty saves of all time, allowing Saibari to step up and send his side through 3-2 on penalties and send the Dutch back home. Meanwhile, Nusa opened the scoring for Norway against Ivory Coast with this banger, but Amad Diallo responded, coming off the bench to drag his team back into the game in the second half. But of course, in the dying minutes, it was that man again, Erling Haaland, to tap in the winning goal. And France continued their brilliant form against Sweden, with Mbappe at his electric best opening the scoring beautifully, before Elise laid in Barcola to slap in a second. And then the Elise and Mbappe partnership linked up again, as Mbappe grabbed a second in a 3-0 win for France. For nearly 40 years, Mexicans have been speaking of the 5th game curse, failing to make it past 4 games at the World Cup since hosting in 1986. But this time, once again hosts, Mexico had a different feel about them. They opened the tournament brushing aside South Africa for a cagey 1-0 win over South Korea, and then a convincing 3-0 second half demolition job of Czechia gave them a burst of momentum to close the group stage, heading into their round of 32 game hosting Ecuador at the Azteca. And Mexico were about to put on one of their greatest shows in World Cup history. They attacked this game with pure adrenaline, flying out the blocks, as Quinones cut inside and whacked in an absolute banger inside 21 minutes. The Azteca erupted like never before, but Mexico weren't done there, as Quinones laid it off to Jimenez, who thumped it brilliantly into the top corner. And Ecuador could do absolutely nothing as they watched the hosts have their moment, with their night summed up by Hincapie's late red card for covering his mouth. But for Mexico, it was one of their greatest performances. A game they will never forget, as they finally ended the curse of the 5th game. Congo shocked England, taking an early lead through this goal by Brian Sapenga, and their goalkeeper Mpazi had the game of his life, with England still trailing after 75 minutes. But then Gordon played it in, and it was met by the head of Harry Kane to drag England back into it. And with less than 5 minutes to play, he picked it up and Bukaki'd it into the top corner with an impeccable strike. An incredible performance by the England captain to spearhead his side into the next round. Senegal then took the lead against Belgium as Diarra tapped in the opener, before Sarr beautifully plucked out a wonderful ball and then walloped it on the volley past Courtois, handing Senegal a 2-0 lead, and they looked to be comfortably heading into the next round with 5 minutes to play. However, Lukaku was able to pull one back for Belgium with a nice finish, and then from out of nowhere, Senegal's bozo in goal completely missed the ball, allowing Tielemans to send the game to extra time in the last minute. And with penalties looming, Tielemans was taken down in the box in the 120th minute, and it was him who stepped up to take the penalty and complete a shocking Belgium comeback. After looking dead and buried, they forced their way into the round of 32 at Senegal's expense. Some atrocious defending by Bosnia allowed Balaguer to put the USA into the lead, but then he was unfortunate to land badly on his opponent and get himself a red card. The USA was still comfortable though, and a Tillman free kick sealed their place in the next round. Spain played some great football against Austria, with a cutback finished off by Oyarzabal in the first half, before a cross by Baena was met by the head of their right back, and to wrap it up, a beautiful ball across by Cucurella was finished again by Oyarzabal. All eyes were on Ronaldo against Croatia, but it was Perisic who laid the first blow, putting Croatia into the lead. However, after a foul from a corner, Ronaldo would finally get his first World Cup knockout goal from the penalty spot. And with the game at 1-1 in stoppage time, Rafael Leao played an orgasmic ball met by Gonçalo Ramos to seemingly win the game for Portugal. However, in the 100th minute, Croatia played in one last ball, and it was laid across the box for Gvardiol to finish and shockingly send the game to extra time after a blockbuster finish. But then it went to VAR and was ruled out for offside after the slightest of touches by Mantanovic. Croatian hearts have been broken in the most stunning fashion possible, but Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo were through by the skin of their teeth. Some brilliant play by Manzambi saw him get to the touchline and set up Mbolo for a tap-in. And then early into the second half, an awful clearance landed straight to Ndoye, who produced a brilliant finish in a straightforward 2-0 win for Switzerland against Algeria. Ashur met a ball into the box to put Egypt to goal up against Australia, but an own goal saw the Australians claw their way back into the game, seeing the tie head to penalties as Australia subbed on Matt Ryan for the shooter, who was unable to save a single one of Egypt's 4 penalties, whilst this bozo Harry Souttar and an 18-year-old centre-back both failed to hit the target, meaning Australia were going home. And a fantastic ball across finish off by John Arias saw Colombia beat Ghana 1-0 in their clash. And now it was time for the reigning champions Argentina to face off against the dark horses Cape Verde. Obviously Argentina were expected to win, whilst the entire footballing world was hoping on Cape Verde to pull off an unlikely upset. But in the first half, Messi beautifully plucked the ball out from the sky and smacked it past Vecino in goal, putting Argentina into the lead. However, in the second half, Cape Verde came out a different team, as the ball was played into Duarte, who smashed it low and hard into the corner, and the champions were stunned. Could Cape Verde really pull off the upset? After some immense pressure by Argentina, the underdogs were able to hold on, and after 90 minutes the game was still 1-1, meaning we were heading for extra time. But it didn't take long whatsoever for Argentina to ruin everyone's evening, as Martinez stumped it in from a corner, and it seemed like Argentina had spoiled the party. However, Cape Verde were not dead yet, as the ball found its way out to Sidney Lopez Cabral, who chopped inside and landed up an absolute screamer to send the entire world crazy. Nobody could believe what they were seeing as Cabral leaped into the stands to hug his girlfriend. It was potentially the moment of the World Cup, and Cape Verde were back in the game. But in the 110th minute, the inevitable happened. Messi's corner was met by Romero, and Argentina were ahead again. And this time Cape Verde weren't able to fight back, as the game ended 3-2. But whilst Cape Verde may have lost the game, they won everyone's hearts at this World Cup. 16 kicked off with a spirited Canadian performance against Morocco. However, they were unable to build on their impressive display and were punished by a well-worked set-piece routine expertly finished off by Ounahi, who was then set up by Brahim Diaz in the box and slapped in his second late on. And in 98th minute, Rahimi Daga was the final nail in the Canadian coffin, as Morocco marched on to the quarter-finals. After upsetting Germany, Paraguay were rewarded with a clash against France, where they went on to commit every possible kind of footballing atrocity on the pitch, somehow without getting a single yellow card, in what has to be one of the most disgraceful refereeing performances in football history. However, VAR did eventually give France a penalty, which Mbappe obviously scored to send France into the next round. Mateus Cunha won Brazil an early penalty against Norway. However, a terrible spot kick by this bozo Bruno Guimaraes was saved by the goalkeeper, keeping the scores level. And then with 11 minutes to play, the ball was clipped into Erling Haaland to hammer home a header, and Norway shockingly had the lead. And with Brazil chasing the game, in the last minute Haaland picked up the ball on the edge of the box and sniped it perfectly into the bottom corner to complete a terrific brace and a big upset. Brazil did then win a penalty in the 98th minute, with Neymar rolling in his final ever World Cup goal. But it was too little too late for Brazil, who went home in the round of 16 whilst Norway progressed. Mexico had enjoyed a wonderful World Cup so far, winning all 4 games, scoring 8 goals and conceding none, and had just completed one of the greatest nights in their footballing history with a pulsating 2-0 victory over Ecuador, putting an end to their 5th game curse and setting up a round of 16 tie against an England side who had just about made their way past Congo. Moreover, it was the final game of this World Cup at the Azteca Stadium, the temple of Mexican football, set 2,200 meters above sea level, with the talk of altitude dominating the English media's discussion prior to this game, in what was set to be one of England's biggest ever tests in the World Cup. And what followed was a game for the ages. England struck first blood as Saka dinked it across from Bellingham to head in from close range, and then straight from kickoff, England won it back and Kane set up Bellingham to tap in again, making it 2-0 England, scoring twice in under 2 minutes. And with adrenaline pulsating through the English veins, all that talk about altitude was suddenly forgotten. However, before half-time, a free kick bounced its way into the path of Quinones to smash one back for the hosts, and it was game on again. And in the second half, it got nervy for England as Quansah was sent off for this awful challenge. But just a few minutes later, the ball found its way to Gordon, who was taken down by the goalkeeper, and it was a penalty for England. And of course, Harry Kane stepped up to take it and score it, restoring England's 2-goal cushion. It didn't last though, as it was Kane who made a foul in his own box, handing Jimenez the opportunity to drag Mexico back into the contest once more. But Mexico were unable to find a third, meaning the game finished Mexico 2, England 3. With Mexico's incredible campaign coming to a close as England moved on to the quarter-finals. One of the most historic nights for England at the World Cup. Portugal versus Spain was a cagey game with not much in it. But then in the 91st minute, Mikel Merino stepped up to win it for Spain, calmly finishing past the goalkeeper, in what was Cristiano Ronaldo's final ever World Cup match. And then was the USA against Belgium. However, before this game, the World Cup was caught up in one of its greatest ever controversies, as FIFA announced that Balogun's suspension for his red card against Bosnia would itself be suspended for another year, meaning he was unprecedentedly clear to play against Belgium, a decision that sent shockwaves through the footballing world, especially when it was revealed that President Trump made the boss calls to Infantino asking for the red card to be taken off.
Yes, I asked for a review by FIFA. Red card. I didn't know what the hell a red card was. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding.
It was a stain on this World Cup, once more revealing the corruption of FIFA as an organisation and the ineptitude of its president. From handing Donald Trump a FIFA Peace Prize award in the build-up to the competition, to the treatment of the Iranian national team having to travel from Mexico each match, to failing to let in Somali referee Omar Artan, and also the scandalous hydration breaks in each match, intended to allow American broadcasters to run ads mid-game, and now to this. A clear breach of FIFA's World Cup protocols in favour of the host nation, and in particular in favour of the president Infantino had been buddying up to for years. It was a disgrace, and this not to mention the farcical nature of the 2018, 2022, 2030 and 2034 World Cup hosts as well, and will hopefully be the turning point in this corrupt organisation being held to account for the good of the sport. Anyways, back to the football. So with all of that corruption, how did the USA do in their next game? Well, they got absolutely flipping battered. First, their defence looked like an absolute bunch of clowns, allowing Charles de Ketelaere to tap in from close range, making it 1-0 Belgium. The USA did get back into the game through a deflected free kick, but pretty much instantly, Trossard whipped it in, and de Ketelaere scored again, this time with a header. And then in the second half, this diabolical American bozo in goal left Hannigan an open net, which Tim Ream somehow let go straight through him and in, before Chris Richards gave it directly to Romelu Lukaku to wrap it all up, sealing an embarrassing defeat by the USA. And after a promising start, their tournament ended in shame. A corruption scandal followed by one of the worst knockout performances in World Cup history. Argentina versus Egypt was expected to be a simple win for Argentina, but they went behind early on to a header by Yasser Ibrahim at the back post as Egypt took a shock lead. However, it took just 3 minutes for Tagliafico to win a penalty, and of course it was Lionel Messi to step up. But it was flipping saved after a lackluster penalty, and then in the second half, after some dazzling wing play by Hassan followed by a beautiful pass by Salah, Zico made it 2-0 to Egypt. But as Egypt celebrated, VAR overturned the goal for a foul on Martinez. However, justice was served, as after some more brilliant play by Hassan, he laid it across for Zico to score, and now it really was 2-0, as Argentina were facing the exit door with 25 minutes to play. A Messi cross into Romero seemed to just be a consolation goal, but then Messi stepped up and smashed it in off the bar, clawing Argentina back level, and then came the inevitable. As in the dying minutes, Martinez whipped it in for Enzo Fernandez to head in the winning goal, and Argentina had pulled off an improbable comeback. But then the footage showed two possible fouls in the build-up. In particular, this foul on Salah, almost identical to the foul for Egypt's disallowed goal. However, astonishingly, no foul was given and the goal was allowed to stand, meaning Argentina were through and Egypt were out. And the Egyptians could not believe it, accusing the competition of being rigged in Argentina's favour. And finally was Switzerland against Colombia, a dreadful game that ended 0-0 and went to penalties, where this bozo Davinson Sanchez hit the bar after stuttering backwards. But Akanji might be an even bigger bozo, because what the flip is this? However, Cucho Hernandez instantly had his spot kick saved, and Vargas stepped up and won it for Switzerland 4-3 on penalties.
Oh, what a feeling. Look what we've overcome.
Mbappe won a first half penalty against Morocco, but shockingly his spot kick was saved, keeping the scores level. However, he redeemed himself, scoring a beautiful goal from the edge of the box in the second half. And then Dembele smacked it in from range to wrap up a 2-0 win for France, sending them into the semis. Fabien Ruiz knocked Spain into the lead against Belgium after a rebound was directed towards them, but Charles de Ketelaere headed Belgium back into the game to level the scores at 1-1. Then Courtois picked up an injury and had to be replaced by Lamens off the bench, who almost instantly parried the ball directly into the path of Mikel Merino to once again win the game for Spain in the dying minutes and send Belgium home. An absolute wonder strike by Sheldrup took everyone by surprise and smacked Norway into the lead against England. But not long later, Bellingham picked up the ball and worked the angle to draw England back level. And with the game ending 1-1 and going to extra time, a Rodgers strike from range was saved and followed up by that man again, Jude Bellingham, to win the tie for England and send his side into the semi-finals. And finally was Argentina versus Switzerland, where McAllister headed Argentina into an early lead from a corner. But in the second half, Switzerland were able to get back into the game through a finish by Dan Ndoye. However, just as Switzerland were gaining momentum, VAR called the referee to reconsider the yellow card he gave to Paredes, instead switching it to a second yellow card for Brilian Bolo for a dive, a red card that swung the momentum back into Argentina's favour as the game went to extra time, where a fantabulous banger by Julian Alvarez from outside the box put Argentina into a late lead, and with Switzerland chasing an equaliser, Argentina came forward with one last attack, sealing the win and Argentina's place in the final four through Lautaro Martinez on the rebound. France were everyone's favourites to win the tournament, looking unstoppable with their attack of Kylian Mbappe, Ousmane Dembele and Michael Olise, winning every game so far and even being compared to Brazil's 2002 team by some. However, in the semi-finals they faced their biggest test yet, a Spain side who had beaten France in the semis en route to winning the Euros just 2 years earlier, and so far in this tournament had conceded just a single goal. In the first half, this bozo Dinho took down Yamal in the box, handing the Spanish a penalty, which was whacked home by Oyarzabal. And after a terrific tournament, France was struggling to get into the game, as Spain linked up beautifully to open up the space for their right back to make it 2. A goal that would saw a 2-0 win for Spain, and the favourites were out. The other semi-final was a blockbuster matchup between two sides who had a lot of bad blood between them, most famously with the case of Diego Maradona's hand of God goal in the 1986 quarter-finals. And now England and Argentina had the chance to win their place in the World Cup final. As expected, it was a fiery affair, with a hell of a lot of fouls but not a lot of shots. But eventually it would be England who took the lead, as Morgan Rogers whipped it in for Anthony Gordon to tap home, and with 5 minutes to play, England had one foot in the World Cup final. However, scandalously, Thomas Tuchel's England side decided to park the bus after they scored, handing Argentina an abundance of opportunities to get back into the game. And eventually it would be Enzo Fernandez to fire a rocket past Jordan Pickford, and now Argentina were back level in the 85th minute and had all the momentum in their favour, as Lionel Messi picked up and crossed it into Lautaro Martinez, who headed in from close range. And in the 92nd minute, Argentina broke an England fans' hearts, making it another late win for Argentina, who fired themselves into the World Cup final to face Spain. But before that, we had the third place playoff game, and this game with no expectations ended up being an absolute thriller. First, Declan Rice picked up the ball, drove and thumped in a banger for range, before Ezri Konsa headed an England second from a corner. Then Rashford laid it back for Bukayo Saka to tap in past the defenders on the line, who proceeded to grab his second before half time after a wonderful assist by Eze, making it 4-0 to England after 45 minutes. However, France sought to restore some pride in the second half, pulling one back through Kylian Mbappe, who then played it through to Bradley Barcola, making it 4-2. Before some beautiful link-up play between Olise and Mbappe saw the French captain smashing his 10th goal of the tournament to win himself the Golden Boot. Their comeback stopped there though, as England won a penalty later on converted by Bukayo Saka to grab a World Cup hat-trick. Ousmane Dembele cut inside and finished to pull yet another goal back for the French, but Jude Bellingham broke in behind the defence, cut inside, sent the defenders, and then slotted it neatly into the bottom corner to round off a stunning 6-4 win for England, completing one of the greatest games in World Cup history. And then it was time for the World Cup final. Spain versus Argentina. Football's wonder boy Lamine Yamal against the greatest of all time, Lionel Messi. But it ended up being an absolutely awful final where Argentina managed 0 shots inside 90 minutes. With the first big action coming in the 92nd minute as this absolute bozo Enzo Fernandez got himself sent off for this stupid challenge leading to a second yellow card. And in the aftermath, Lionel Messi attempted to get Cucurella sent off for this. Beyond embarrassing. Anyways, the game went to extra time where a perfectly fine Spain goal was somehow not given by VAR, with the world watching yet another disgraceful decision in favour of Argentina, who I think themselves forgot it's impossible to rig a penalty in your favour if you don't step foot in the opponent's penalty box. But eventually the whole world was able to celebrate as Ferran Torres beautifully slapped in a volley and the only goal of the game to win his side the World Cup. However, then Argentina finally had their first attack of the game, which was after the final whistle as Paredes began to throttle the Spanish players, with absolutely no one whatsoever surprised with how the Argentinian players conducted themselves after losing.
Coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Gotta be down because I want it all. It started out with a kiss, how did it end up like this? It was only a kiss, it was only a kiss. Now I'm falling asleep and she's calling a cab while he's having a smoke and she's taking a drag. Now they're going to bed and my stomach is sick and it's all in my head, but she's touching his chest. Now he takes off her dress. Now let me go. And I just can't look, it's killing me. And taking control. Jealousy turning snakes into the sea, swimming through sick lullabies, choking on your alibis. But it's just the price I pay. Destiny is calling me. Open up my eager eyes, 'cause I missed the bright side.
Yo guys, thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate it, man, because this video took me for a flipping ever. When I tell you, yeah, this video took me about 5 weeks to make initially, and then I accidentally deleted the video when I finished it. Like, I deleted the whole project by accident, which meant I had to start all over again, which took me another 2 weeks. So yeah, if you did enjoy it, please make sure to like, share and subscribe. Also follow me on Instagram and on TikTok. Show all your support, man, and hopefully all that time I spent on this flipping video was worth it. Anyways, in a bit, G.